So good afternoon and welcome to Walker & Dunlop's Wednesday webinar. I'm Susan Weber, your moderator. I would like to welcome Willy Walker and Eric Yuan, CEO of Zoom, who will be discussing how Eric built such a scalable product, how he navigated the growing pains, and what's next. Thank you for joining us, and now I'll turn the call over to Willy.
Thank you, Susan, and welcome to the Walker Webcast. If it's Wednesday, it's the Walker Webcast, and today is a very special Walker Webcast on Zoom with Zoom founder and CEO Eric Yuan. Many of you have seen Zoom's fantastic earnings announcement on Monday and stock move over 40% yesterday, bringing the company's market cap to an eye-popping $120 billion, which makes Zoom worth more than IBM. I cannot wait to dive into the business and culture that have made Zoom so successful with Eric. Before turning to Eric, just a couple quick thoughts on the commercial real estate industry. First, many of you saw the executive order by President Trump yesterday that halts all evictions for the remainder of 2020. While the president's executive order is focused on the pandemic and making sure that people have housing and shelter during these challenging times, which we fully support, the eviction moratorium is only one piece of a broader relief effort to control the virus and support struggling Americans and businesses adversely impacted by the pandemic. The $400 per week of supplemental unemployment benefits that the president authorized 2 weeks ago will run out in the first week of October. A broad stimulus bill, which includes supplemental unemployment payments, a new round of PPP loans for small businesses, rental assistance, and many other forms of assistance, needs to be drafted and approved by both the House and Senate immediately. Treasury Secretary Mnuchin was very clear yesterday that further assistance is needed, and we must push members of Congress to close the gap between the $3.5 trillion House bill and the $1.5 trillion Senate bill to get relief flowing. While Congress's inability to take action on behalf of the American public is both surprising and disappointing, the markets continue to perform better than expected. Rental payments are holding up extremely well. The number of single-family and multifamily GSE loans in forbearance is holding steady around 7% and 2% respectively, and the financing markets continue to be extremely active with rates so low. I spoke with a large Walker & Dunlop multifamily borrower yesterday who owns over $2 billion in multifamily properties, who is 99% collected on August rents. As Ivy Zellman and I discussed last week, housing has become the focus of Americans during this pandemic, and that is generating strong numbers in both the single-family and multifamily industries. I did note this morning that Pinterest decided to pay over $80 million to back out of their new lease on their to-be-built headquarters building in San Francisco. I'll be interested to hear Eric's thoughts on whether Pinterest is an outlier or the beginning of a wave of tech companies not expanding in the Bay Area. Finally, my guest next week on the Walker Webcast will be U.S. Olympic and Paralympic CEO Sarah Hirshland, and the most decorated American Olympic swimmer of all time, 5-time gold medalist Katie Ledecky. At a time when all of us are challenged to plan for the future, whether our kids are going back to school, when we're going to get back into the office, when we can travel again for vacation, etc., there is no singular event that requires peak physical and mental preparation like the Olympics. So I will discuss with Sarah and Katie how Olympians like Katie are dealing with the uncertainty of when the games will actually happen and how to maintain physical and mental strength during the pandemic. I hope you can join us. So with that, on to Eric. So Eric, I need to start by asking you, how do you feel today?
I think, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to join this exciting webinar. I am truly appreciative for that. I do not think there's any difference between today, yesterday, last week, this week, because on the one hand, we are very, very busy, and to make sure keep the service up, because the lot of people are counting on Zoom and have the people stay connected. On the other hand, and also there's a lot of opportunities, right, for the future growth, and also what's the future workplace look like, and we spend a lot of time on that, how to further improve our service. So with that, actually, every day we focus on execution. I really do not see any, the difference. Yeah.
So you went straight to the business, but I know that you're very focused on creating happiness through Zoom, creating happiness in the lives of your employees. So I'll come back to you one more time. How are you actually feeling today? And I understand that the emotions how the company is executing may not change day to day, but I'm curious about how you're doing today.
I feel very happy because at Zoom and every employee, myself included, we would like to ask ourselves the first question when we wake up every day. Do you feel happy or not? If you do, please come to work, right? And to change the world, or come to office prior to pandemic crisis. If you do not feel happy, seriously, you do not need to, to open up your computer to work. You figure out what's the root cause, which will pay. That's always our philosophy at Zoom. So this morning when I woke up, yes, I asked the same question. I feel very happy. I'm fully recharged to start working.
So you received Glassdoor's #1 CEO of a large company award in 2018, and then you were #2 in Glassdoor's best places to work in a large company category last year. And when people think about culture, Eric, they think about, to some degree, who flies all over the country, meets with lots of employees, and sort of is espousing the culture of the company all the time. And you have built this incredible culture at Zoom that has gotten awards, but not only that, but has allowed the company to scale to the degree it has. What has been the key element of creating that culture at Zoom?
Really, that's a great question. First of all, I would say the culture is indeed the #1 thing, and in particular for a startup company. I remember when I started the company, the first day, only myself showed up in a small office. I wanted to know what kind of a company I wanted to work for in the next 15 or 20 years. I want to make sure I join a company where I feel very happy. I'm, very motivated. I wanted to work. But otherwise, if you, join a company where you just do not feel excited, you do not feel happy, guess what? The overall productivity is not good. Plus, if your employees, if they are not happy, you really do not dare to let them interact with the customers or partners. So happiness is the key. That is also our company culture to deliver happiness. Meaning, as the CEO of the company, my #1 priority is to make sure every Zoom employee feel happy every day. And together as a business, we truly deliver happiness to our customers, do all we can to listen to our customers, think everything from their perspective. When we make a decision, also think from their perspective. Do not always look at it from our perspective. If we care about the customer, guess what? Customers, for sure, they like to use Zoom. They pay for our Zoom service, pay for the service, then we can survive. I think that's a very positive loop. But however, being a small startup, it's not very hard to have a culture. But as we further grew our business, when we hire so many people, it's pretty hard. It's not that easy. I still do not know what's the formula. So every day we think about all kinds of problems, what we can do, right, to hire those employees who fit very well to our culture, how to evolve our culture. I'm learning, so it's not that easy.
So I want to get to the expansion of Zoom and how you have managed that in a moment, but I want to first back up a little bit to your childhood and coming to the U.S. and starting Zoom, and then all you've managed over the past year. Your parents were both geology engineers, and you grew up in help me pronounce that, Eric. Tai'an, in the Shandong province of China, a mountainous region in northeastern China. Talk a little bit about your formative years. Were you always focused on computer science, and did you ever think that you'd follow in your parents' footsteps as being a geologist, or are we lucky that you dodged being a geologist and became a technologist?
I guess probably my parents, both of them, they have geology background. They never wanted me to focus on the geology, and they never mentioned that. And interestingly enough, actually, back then, my father and when I was at middle school or junior high school, I even do not know what's the computer. My father, he really tried to understand the importance of a computer. Even when I was a kid, he always told me that, hey, when you grown up, you should learn computer, do something like this. I still don't understand what he said back then. Essentially, when I, kind of go to the college, my father told me that you either focus on the math or the computer. That's the future. And I just listened. And I was not a good, a student at the school. Not always try to get a grade A or A plus. And but I do like read the stories about the Silicon Valley and HP story or Microsoft or the Apple stories. I was so impressed. Every time I read that story, I just felt excited, rather than spend all the time to get a grade A or A plus. And but later on, when I go to college, my major was applied mathematics. Minor is about a computer, programming. And I think I gave this credit to my father because I really do not understand what I'm going to do when I grow up. I was a kid.
So you mentioned that you love the stories of Silicon Valley, and I believe you heard a speech that Bill Gates gave in 1994 in Japan, which inspired you to come to Silicon Valley. What was it in that speech that you heard from Gates that said sort of, I've got to leave home, I've got to leave the part of the world where I live and head to the United States and get to Silicon Valley?
Yeah, sorry, that's in 1995. Bill Gates, I was a Windows programmer and, and know Windows very well. I never, saw him. And I was on a training program in Tokyo, and back in 1995. And I think once over the weekend, he was there. I think Friday, to give a keynote speech and talk about the future of internet. And on the one hand, I was so impressed about his speech. On the other hand, it felt like, more like, hey, someone is the hero. And the night before, you even, kind of was so excited, you even cannot sleep well. Wow, tomorrow I will see him, right? So it's very excited. That's why I listened to his speech very, very carefully. And also after that, it's just a lot of PCs with the Netscape and the browser, right? You can search for something, and I feel, wow, that's a future. So I was extremely inspired by his speech and by his story as well. At that time, I thought about, wow, if the future is the internet, I got to embrace that. I got to embrace the first revolution of the internet. That's why on the way back, I already knew that was my, the next. So I want to come to Silicon Valley and to join the internet to pursue my American dream.
So you decided you wanted to come to Silicon Valley, but there was a very specific reason why you chose to go into WebEx at the time. I believe your interest in video telephony came from a long-distance relationship you had when you were growing up, where you would have to take long train rides, and you wanted to try and figure out how you could actually see that person through a long distance, and that's what got you into video telephony. Is that story accurate? And then also, does that woman know that she is somewhat responsible for the founding of an incredibly large company today that's larger than IBM?
So just to clarify one thing, I do not think that story is accurate. And
oh, really?
A little bit accurate is, anyway, the true story is I applied for visa several times, and unfortunately, I got a decline. Finally, the WebEx, sponsored me to have a H1 working visa to come to Silicon Valley to join. And I even do not know that's video conferencing. That's a data collaboration. And I was working on that for many, many, many years. And later on, I joined Cisco, and in 2011, I left. I wanted to build the next generation solution. And when I started Zoom, and I did not think about, because when I was in college, there was the girlfriend, or think about the daydream to have a device. I never thought about that. However, the 2 years after I started Zoom, after I saw our product, the service the first time, I could connect the dots. At that time, I realized, I remember that when I was in college, I thought about something like this. Just one click, you can talk with anyone, you see others. Also, that kind of, I can connect the dots. When I started, I never thought about that. Yeah.
So when you were at WebEx, Eric, were were you thinking one day I want to start my own firm? I mean, when did you sort of get the entrepreneurial bug? Because there are plenty of people who sort of from their early days sort of say, you know, I want to build something. I want to build a business. And they've got sort of that entrepreneurial piece to them kind of from the get-go. Whereas there are plenty of other people who sort of, you know, move into being an entrepreneur after they've seen the opportunity arise. Would you call yourself an early entrepreneur? Would you think that your entrepreneurial spirit came from having seen opportunities when you were at either WebEx or Cisco?
So I call Silicon Valley scalable valley. It's hard to not think about entrepreneurship when you live in Silicon Valley for such a long time. The reason why Silicon Valley is worldwide #1 innovation place is that here you have great culture. And look at the entire ecosystem. A lot of successful people, they want to help you proactively. And even you try something, you fail, it's okay. Everybody still want to support you. Because I lived in this place for such a long time. You know, for the first several years, I worked so hard at WebEx, but I knew someday I'm going to start a company. I just do not know when. Because, you know, this is the benefit of living in Silicon Valley. So, however, it takes some time. You know, sometimes even before WebEx got acquired, every time I thought about leaving to do something new because the emotional connection, and I said, let's you know, work there for several more years until another milestone until actually 2011. You know, I was already more than 40 years. At that time, I thought about that. If I do not start a company, my energy level might be, you know, not as good as before. So anyway, when I came here, I think for the first several years, I already knew, you know, I wanted to start a company. I like all those great entrepreneurs here in Silicon Valley, and all of them are my real models.
So it's my understanding that one of the reasons you left Cisco was because you had pitched them on a new smartphone-friendly video conferencing system. How close is Zoom today to that vision that you pitched to Cisco back in the, you know, what now almost 10 years ago?
So first of all, I think Cisco is a great company, and I was there. I was corporate vice president, and Cisco paid me very well. I learned a lot, you know, in particular, learned a lot from the former CEO of Cisco, John Chambers, a lot of other leaders. And initially, I did not think about leaving at all. I wanted to grow the WebEx business to $1 billion revenue, and then I would leave to do something else. However, back to the 2010 timeframe, and you know, back at that time, social networking was so popular, and everyone talked about, you know, to create a business unit. I mean, at Cisco, to focus on enterprise social networking. Because I spent a lot of time on talking with customers. I do not think there's a huge value by doing that, but it's very frustrating because nobody listens. They say, "Oh, Eric, you do not understand. That's a future of collaboration, and you know, you have to do this, to do that." I tried almost a year, so and failed. That's why, okay, I wanted to leave to prove. I think you need to have another solution. So focus on the video first and the architecture.
So I think I don't want to say they're misperceptions, Eric, but I think they're important for people to understand about Zoom and about the company pre-COVID. And that is, the first thing is, I think that there's a sense that COVID sort of made Zoom what Zoom is, and Zoom was an incredible company pre-COVID. And the second piece to it is that I think many people look at you as a technologist, and the actual numbers on Zoom pre-going public are just unbelievable. So I went and did some research on your filing for the S1 when you went public. And one of the analysts wrote and this is against 16 other incredibly successful SaaS companies. And the analyst wrote, from looking at Zoom's meteoric rise compared to other companies, they're in a class of their own. Every metric they disclose is best in class. Revenue growth, sales efficiency, profitability, net dollar expansion, growth of $100,000 plus revenue, and enterprise deals. So talk for a moment about I mean, it's one thing to be a great technologist and come up with a great idea, but you built a company that completely outperformed the competition before COVID and everything else that has driven you so much further than everybody else. Talk for a moment about how you built Zoom to be able to have those kind of financial metrics.
Yeah, so yeah, again, I think when we started in 2011, there were already so many very successful SaaS companies and a lot of great companies like Salesforce, like Workday, right? All those ServiceNow today, a lot of great companies. And, we learn a lot from all other companies. The Viva is not a great example. The founder and CEO Peter also sit on our board. So when we started, we would like to laser focus on serving enterprise customers. That's our, our goal when we started. Plus, our philosophy was that we do not want to grow our business at no cost, just to focus on growth. Even on day one, I wanted to be cash flow positive. And we specifically wanted to slow down. And for the first 4 years, we even did not have a marketing team. And when we try to hire the sales rep, we always want to make sure, hey, if we hire 5 sales reps, only until their productivity is very high, and then we are going to hire the new rep. So we are taking a very conservative approach, to focus on the enterprise or business customers. The goal is to make sure we can build the trust with every new customers. So if there's a conflict, back then, early on, we told our team, always focus on your existing customers. Don't always think about getting new customers. The common mistake is just focus on growth. Every day think about get a new customer. I think that's not as important as serving the existing customer. Because software as a service is very important. If your existing customers, if they are not happy, no matter what you do, and you are going to have a problem, you are going to hit a wall. So we are, thinking a lot about keep serving the existing customers, keep, caring about them. That's the reason why I think, customers like our solution, and that's why we look at some of those financial metrics we did relatively well. And this pandemic crisis is totally actually changed our business model, changed the way for us to think, because we never thought about the first-time users, all kinds of new use cases, but we learn quickly. We do face all kinds of challenges or problems every day internally. But, the customer, they trust Zoom. We have a great intention to really help to make the world a better place. We are going to learn from that mistake. We are going to grow our business to the next level. So having said that, how to focus on the trust with your customer, that's the key for you to have a sustainable financial metrics.
You mentioned that you were focusing on enterprise customers, and when you went public and for 2019, that was really the focus. And in December of last year, you had about 10 million daily meeting participants on Zoom. And by April of this year, you were at 300 million daily meeting participants on Zoom. And so as you just said, your business model shifted dramatically due to what the pandemic brought to you. How does for everybody listening, I'm assuming there's nobody who's gone through that type of A, shift in their business literally overnight, and B, that type of explosive growth where you go from 10 million daily users to 300 daily meeting participants. How did you and your team manage that explosive growth, Eric? It seems so big and so hard to kind of get your arms around. Clearly you had to add new servers. You had to go and use AWS to add capacity and all that. And to your credit, you had a model that could scale sort of indefinitely. But at the same time, there's just a ton to manage there. Can you talk through that shift from enterprise to sort of B2C and how you manage that?
Yeah, so first of all, the good news is that, from backend side, we do have a scalable architecture. So meaning you just provision, more servers, then you can add capacity to serve more participants. So from that perspective, we manage it well. But again, it's not that very easy because users, came from all over the world. right? We needed to add capacity almost a lot of other countries because we have 17 or 18 data centers. The key thing is about why do we do that? Because we think this is a critical time, right? If we can offer a service to help people stay connected, essentially that's our dream coming true. Like we offered free service to more than 100,000 K-12 schools. It's about our company's corporate social responsibility. No matter how end user, no matter how they are using Zoom, our goal is the same. We do all we can to truly care for them, to make sure they are happy, no matter what kind of use case, like online, like property virtual tour, or the happy hour, online wedding ceremony, or online yoga class. I think this is the critical time when everyone, I think, counts on us. We need to do all we can. In fast forward in 10 or 20 years, we want the world remembers a company called Zoom. We do all we can to help the world, help people stay connected. Even if we are facing all kinds of challenges or problems, we are working very, very hard. Don't let any users down. That's why we listen to the customers, no matter what kind of use cases they use Zoom for, we wanted to serve them well.
And so as you talk about, focus on the customer, as you and I have discussed before, everything you did with Zoom up until the pandemic is incredible and has obviously been wildly successful. But potentially the most successful thing was dealing with the security issues that came up when the service expanded so dramatically into a user base that wasn't, if you will, as skilled or as used to using this type of software on a daily basis. Talk for a moment, Eric, about the challenges that presented and how you and your team dealt with that. Because I think as we look back on history, how you and your team managed that issue so quickly and so effectively is what will be looked back on almost like, any kind of crisis management that any major corporation goes through, to be able to put the appropriate resources, size the issue, and deal with it effectively. There are plenty of companies that have fallen because of that, and other companies that have survived and gone on to new heights. And clearly Zoom did that. So what went on during that period of time? What did you actually have to do?
Yeah. So maybe let me take a step back to share with you, what's our philosophy. And prior to this pandemic crisis, I often told our team, being a startup company, speed is everything. And you got to move quickly. Otherwise, your big legacy competitors, they are going to win. So I'm excited that, it's just whenever you have facing a problem, just to quickly execute on that and move as fast as you can. If something goes wrong, fix that quickly. That's our philosophy before. During this pandemic crisis, I remember the Friday, and we heard about a lot of K-12 schools that are going to shut it down. Because our philosophy always speed, I called the team, hey, even if we never served for K-12 schools and we focus on the high ed, we talk about this, hey, K-12 schools are going to shut it down. Why not give them free access to let them use Zoom? And we all discussed that. We all feel very excited. Yes, over the weekend, we had a capacity, Monday, wow, a lot of K-12 schools started using Zoom. We were very excited, very happy. In 2 or 3 days later, guess what? The meeting bombing, the Zoom bombing happened. And because quite often, they're very excited to share the Zoom meeting interface to the social media with the meeting ID, a lot of meeting password. And that's how those security and privacy issues started. And I think we learned that quickly and realized not only do we offer a service, but also we should play a role of IT. Because Zoom was built to serve enterprise customers, even if you have lots of security features. Normally, we work together with enterprise IT team to enable or disable those security features. But what if they do not have an IT team? I think the number one mistake I made as a CEO was that always focus on speed is not right anymore, because the company is a different company. Even if your intention is right, you got to make sure your decision is very thoughtful. Right? We learned that quickly. That's the number one. It's the number one mistake I made. However, I think the good news, I think the culture-wise, I think that we have an open and transparent culture. That's something I learned here. When you focus on everything, just make sure everything open, transparent. And by doing that, even if you made a mistake, your customer, they are going to trust you. Don't hide anything. This is a mistake. We are going to do all we can because we do have a great intention. So we quickly, fix that problem, add a lot of the security, the features, even, freeze our feature development for 90 days. And a lot of users, send us a very positive feedback. I think, I learned a lot during that process. And don't always focus on speed. And make sure even you have a good intention, be thoughtful. And keep everything open and transparent. Ultimately, if you build the trust, I think you still be okay, even if you are making some mistakes.
You've given Zoom to more than 100,000 schools, K to 12. And as you know, Eric, there's sort of a hybrid going on where many schools are trying to get back physically operating, but giving students the ability to also be virtual. How are you working on the integration of Zoom into a classroom that isn't purely, so in the spring it was all virtual. So everyone's at home, they're in front of a computer like you and I are today, and the audio is the link and the sound is all wired together. Now we're getting this hybrid where both in the corporate setting as well as in the school setting, we have kind of people physically there, and then we also have people virtually there. How are you working to integrate those two things to make it so that that experience all works seamlessly?
Yes, great question. When it comes to the school, the classroom hybrid setting, it's not that easy. That's why recently we hired a full-time product manager focused on education. You are so right. In some students, if they are in the classroom, some students, at home, what's the setup, what's the layout look like? Do we have the right hardware in the classroom? I do not think anyone had a great solution yet. So we needed to work on that. But in terms of the hybrid for the business, for workplace, I think that that's sort of our expertise, right? We focused on that before. The conference room set it up, a lot of things we know how to do it. For the classroom hybrid setup, this is something new, and we got to learn that quickly. I think it's likely, and for business, it's hybrid. For classroom, I'm not sure this is a hybrid model, will become mainstream or not. Maybe after the pandemic crisis, I still think for K-12 schools, ideally, this all should go back to campus. Kids, they needed to hang out. They needed to be together every day, right? I do not think that's mainstream. I still think for the schools, especially for K-12, it should be the physical campus learning and experience should be the mainstream.
I will tell you, Eric, my son Wyatt is back physically at school, and he came home and he said that the teacher puts basically a tracker in his or her pocket, and then there's a camera in the classroom that follows him around. And I said, well, will you go find the name of that camera for me? And he comes home and he gave me the name of the camera, and he says, but Dad, that's just a camera made by another company, but we use Eric's company, Zoom, to actually communicate with people not in the classroom. And I thought it was great that Wyatt was sitting there saying they're definitely on your platform. So that's all good. So Eric, the future of Zoom, I have heard you say you're aspiring to make the virtual experience even better than real time. What can we be thinking about that we're going to see from Zoom over the coming years as it relates to enhancing the experience that you and I are having right now?
Yeah. First of all, really, please pass my best wishes to your son.
I will.
Using Zoom. So our vision is that we truly believe someday in the future that video conferencing like Zoom can deliver a better experience than face-to-face meeting. So imagine a world where, say in the future, you and I in a first call like this, and I want to shake hands with you remotely, you will feel my hand shaking. You'll feel my intimacy. And you are drinking a cup of coffee, one click, I can enjoy the smell and remotely. And we speak a different, say anyone speak a different language with AI, with real-time language translation, you can understand each other. and after the meeting, automatically generate a meeting transcription, automatically generate a summary. Imagine that world. I think that experience is much better. Today, a lot of problem, comes from misunderstanding. So imagine that world. I think anyone, no matter where they are, they can talk, one click, feel like in the same conference room, they understand each other. I think that's the future, but we're not there yet, but the technology can really help. So that's why we are very excited, to add all those technologies into the video conferencing. And by like 2040 or 2045, I think that's a vision. So
it almost sounds like there's a convergence of your world and the gaming world to some degree, because clearly the gaming world today is trying to create both, gloves people can wear and skateboards that you can ride in your home, but you have a virtual experience. And so I could see your world as far as Zoom and video conferencing and all that we do to stay in touch with one another coming into the entertainment world. And that'll be a very interesting time to see how you take those technologies and integrate them into something like Zoom, or vice versa, the other side of the gaming world taking in the type of collaboration that happens on Zoom platforms.
Yeah, right on. Yep.
Yeah. Eric, everybody has experienced Zoom burnout. As the founder and CEO of Zoom, I got to ask you, A, how many Zoom calls do you do a day? And B, you are the expert of all experts as it relates to Zoom and Zoom fatigue. What do you do to sort of regenerate and make sure that by the end of the day, as all of us have, you don't get through with the day and say, gosh, if I ever look at another Zoom call, I'm not sure I can handle that. And then of course we come back the next day and do it all over again.
Yeah, so it's a great question. On a peak day back in May, and I had a total of 19 Zoom meetings. And it's pretty tough to have so many meetings. Like yesterday, Tuesday, I look at my calendar. I had a total of 14 meetings, but I only joined 12 because some other reasons I cannot join 2 meetings. So like yesterday, I have total 12 Zoom meetings. Again, it's really not sustainable. And I think also this is more like yesterday is very busy. I would say it's a pretty serious problem. And if you have so many meetings, that's why we talk about that with our employees, with the customers. We are also learn from others about some tips. Don't schedule back-to-back meetings, and in between always take a break, and proactively take a break. Otherwise, you always back-to-back meetings. From one context to another context, you even do not have time to think, to eat, right? To talk with your family and the members, right? That's not sustainable. Plus, might cause some mental health problems. I think to work from home, I do not think there is any big productivity loss. The number one problem is about mental health, anxiety, depression. You've got to deal with that proactively, right? And sometimes just launch a call. Don't talk about anything about the business. Talk about the kids, talk about other things, and also the walk around nearby where you live, and be proactive, and to not have back-to-back meetings. Take a break. It's very important. Otherwise, you're so right. The meeting fatigue is pretty common if you do not do that.
How do you, Eric, you talked about productivity, and I completely concur with you. The productivity at Walker & Dunlop and many companies, including Zoom, is kind of off the charts. Everyone is processing a huge amount of deal flow, and everyone is wildly efficient. But my feeling is that there are 2 things that happen in offices that you sort of have a difficult time doing via Zoom or virtually, and that is creativity and culture. And so the first question would be, how at Zoom have you maintained creativity since everybody's been in a dispersed model? And then the second one, which I think is fascinating to me, is that you don't like to travel. And I saw an interview that you did that said that other than last year, which was a busy travel year for you, the previous 6 years, you'd only traveled twice a year. And you didn't even do your IPO roadshow physically. You did it via Zoom, which makes perfect sense. And I love that. And it's great. But the point being is, how have you created such an incredible culture virtually and not being out and traveling all over the country? So number one is, how do you maintain creativity? And then second, culture.
Yeah, I think first of all, to maintain creativity for when we all work from home is really not easy. I do not think as good as we all work from home, because of work in the office. When you work in the office, quite often see in the hallway, right? I see you really, hey, we have a quick chat. Maybe some ideas come from that. Or maybe in the conference room, you and I with some other engineers, product managers with a whiteboard, and we can talk about some ideas. That's where the creativity comes from. But to work from home, I do not think from a creativity perspective as good as working in the office. That's why we needed to figure out a way to have some workaround. Like we recently announced the Zoom for Home device to give it a whiteboard capability, and also we're going to add more features to mimic the physical, the in the office working environment. Because to focus on creativity, you are so right. I still think, if you only focus on creativity, working in the office is still much better than working from home. But culture-wise, I think, from employee engagement perspective, I think to work from home, at least for now, based on my personal experience, even better than working in the office. Because I have more meetings with our employees. Quite often also can talk with our employees' family members. I probably, we do have an annual kids day, but I think I talk with many our employees' kids as well. So from that perspective, employee engagement is doing pretty well. But the one of the challenges is about the newly hired employees, right? What's your new onboarding process? It's not that easy. And I work for you now and never see any others in once physically. And you don't know what's the office environment look like. That's pretty much something we need to work together, right? I mean, everybody's got to work together. What's the new onboarding process look like? And again, this is something new, and it's not that straightforward.
I think the idea of a Zoom whiteboard session is I heard you mention that, and I hadn't thought about it, because we all come into these meetings and we've all got sort of our Hollywood squares, if you will, and there's an agenda to the meeting and someone's leading the meeting and everyone just kind of jumps in, and that's what you focus on. And the idea of literally showing up to a Zoom meeting and having the screen be literally a whiteboard where people can just sort of start writing on it, and whoever wants to make a comment can kind of jump in, is a whole different sort of experience from what I think most of us have seen or think of as a Zoom meeting, because there's some agenda that's been sent out ahead of it and everyone sort of has their role in their little box, if you will. Yeah,
you are so right. I've seen you talk with the engineers. They all miss, and stand in the same conference room, whiteboard, and talk about some cool ideas. And we do not have that for now.
Eric, there are lots of real estate developers on this webcast listening in who own office buildings all over the country, and I to some degree, I'm sure all of them are extremely happy that they're able to use Zoom to keep their businesses going. And at the same time, I think they also potentially look at you a little bit like retailers look at Jeff Bezos, in the sense that their office space might not be leased at the same rates or at the same velocity post-pandemic because of Zoom. What are your plans as it relates to, you mentioned onboarding new employees at Zoom, and you've grown so dramatically over the past several months that I can only imagine that you've had to hire hundreds and hundreds of employees, if not thousands of employees. What's your thinking as it relates to, okay, it's safe to go back into the office environment. Are you going to be like Google and Facebook and others that say, stay home for a prolonged period of time? Or do you think it's important to get the Zoom employees back and get them together to get all the things from a cultural and from a collaboration standpoint that you and I just talked about?
Yeah, so during the, I think, a crisis period, for sure we want to be conservative, because we do care about our employee health. And we want to make sure everyone working from home. But whenever the situation is getting better, say like we have a vaccine very soon, we want to employ also go back to the office. But they do not need to go back to the office like 5 days a week. It's very likely the hybrid. 2 or 3 days in the office, maybe 2 or 2 days, at home. I think that might be the mainstream, for future, and to have this hybrid, working style. Having said that, I think 2 things I learned over the past several months is, first of all, I think those smaller offices, right? For like you hire like a 10 or dozen employees, one city you have office. I do not think that that's critically important anymore. So you got to have a big, large offices. Because when we work from home and for 2 days and then we go back to office, guess what? We want to have a big office, right? We can hang out, right? We can have a party, right? We can have an all-hands meeting. I think the smaller hub, I think it may not work anymore. That's one. 2 is today, you look at it, especially in Silicon Valley. I look at you walking into anyone's office, you see the big, very big table, long table. Everyone sit next to each other and see each other. It's very open space setup. It's pretty popular. And I think after this pandemic crisis, I do not think that setup still works. You probably need to have more spaces, right? And ideally, everyone should have I would separate the cube, or maybe even like offices. And besides that, I think I think a lot of companies probably they needed to have more spaces, because of that reason. I think again, this is we do have time to learn, right? So before we all go back to office.
I've heard you say, Eric, that when you created Zoom, you wanted to create a frictionless collaboration experience. And I was talking last summer at the Walker & Dunlop conference where I brought up a couple examples of companies that have removed friction. So Amazon being one, Warby Parker being another, Peloton being another. And it's very clear to me that Zoom is right there. And you took the friction out of collaboration online via video conferencing. Many of us in corporate America had used video conferencing technology previous to getting to Zoom. But just like the first time I ever called an Uber, it was one of those transactions that just happened so frictionlessly. There's like no friction whatsoever. I was like, wow, I'll go back and do that again. The first time we started using Zoom, which as you know, was very early on in Zoom's life, it immediately was like, there's nothing else close to this. It's the most frictionless experience. What can you say to other CEOs and entrepreneurs as it relates to how to kind of create that frictionless experience? I mean, in other words, you saw something when you went and pitched to Cisco to create a new type of collaboration on an iPhone, on a video conferencing, and you had this vision, and it came from the same place, if you will, that Amazon and Peloton and Warby Parker and others. What can you say to others as it relates to how to kind of frame creating a frictionless customer experience?
Yeah. So first of all, when it comes to video conferencing, the friction is a key barrier, for any user to try to adopt your service. That's very important. Otherwise, they may not try your service anymore. And actually, even for any other services, I think the key is about you got to look at everything from end user perspective. How to make sure, hey, when an end user they use your service, like take a Uber for example, right? 1 click you can find a driver rather than 3 or 4 clicks. Always think about how to simplify that experience. It's not very hard on day one. And I think I'm pretty sure almost every company, they all think about that, to offer a simple experience. The difficult part is as you add more and more features, and very soon your initial launch with frictionless experience is becoming secondary. Because you keep adding more and more features, That's why I look at a product 3 or 4 years later, my God, it's so hard to use. How to maintain a culture where everybody is thinking about how to simplify, not only the product or service, but also your internal process or procedure as well. Simplicity is the key to help you improve productivity and find out those problems earlier and to care about the end user to truly deliver happiness. So that's our culture. Always think about how to simplify not only the product, but also internal process.
It's really interesting because you started talking about hearing Bill Gates speak back in '95, and if Microsoft's products are in no way simple. I mean, you and I both used Excel spreadsheets that have more functionality to them than we'll ever get to, even think about getting to. And yet Apple took exactly one of Steve Jobs's most sort of noteworthy and valuable leadership qualities or genius was the simplicity of the Apple products, and that these people would come with an iPhone that had all sorts of gadgets on it and this and that. He would keep driving to make this simpler, make it easier to use. And that's what's driven Apple design ever since Steve sort of embedded that into the company and the company culture. I'm still amazed that when I come onto a Zoom call, it's still the exact same menu as it was the first time I ever used it years ago. I got my 4 little squares and I go and do it. And it's so wonderful to hear you talk about, we could add lots and lots of different features to it, but there's this core simplicity to the frictionless experience that we want to maintain for our users.
Really, you are so right. Yes, because there's so many things to do for everyone every day. You got to switch the context very often. If your product or service is not simple, I think nobody would like to try.
So I have 2 final things for you, and then I'm going to let you get back to your day and potentially take a walk between this Zoom call and another Zoom call, Eric. The first one is, when WebEx went public, I heard you say that you asked about sort of the purpose of life. You sort of stopped and said, okay, this is great success, but sort of what is the purpose of life? And from that, you sort of identified this happiness theme, and it's the reason I began with it. I think it's quite unusual to find somebody who is A, as successful as you are, but B, quite honestly, Silicon Valley isn't known for happiness. I mean, I've listened to interviews of Silicon Valley entrepreneur after entrepreneur, and people wouldn't sit there and say Elon Musk is all that excited about happiness or that focused on happiness. Elon Musk has got an incredibly brilliant mind, but I've never heard him sit there and be like, the happiness of our employees and our customers is what we want. He's all about design. He's all about getting to Mars, what have you. How defining was that moment? Because I've heard in a number of interviews with you, you go back to that you had a real kind of soul-searching moment where you said, what is the meaning of life and what do I want to do with my life? And you really focused on creating a company that would deliver happiness. And you seem to have been able to stay true to that sort of North Star, if you will. Can you talk about that for a moment?
Sure. So, I moved to Silicon Valley in 1997, joined WebEx, and at that time, the goal is to help the company to become a public company. That's the goal. Every day, a lot of employees at WebEx, myself included, we were working so hard. The day when WebEx went public in the summer of year 2000, we were very excited. But I think I remember the night, and me and some other engineers, we worked almost the entire night and to troubleshoot for a customer. And suddenly I tried to ask this question, what's the purpose of life? You feel like you achieved a dream, the company already became a public. When I ask the questions, I do not have a good answer. I do not understand. I don't know what's the purpose of life. And I keep asking about that question for a while. I still don't have a good answer. I do not know when and how, suddenly, the epiphany time, came. And I realized, the purpose of life is to pursue a sustainable happiness. Every day you want to be happy. But how to make sure you are happy and also that happiness is sustainable? Also learn that is, if you think about others, always make others happy. Your happiness is sustainable. And that's what I got. And finally, I realized if that's the purpose of life, I will focus on that. That's why when I build the Zoom, every day I think about, number one thing, think about our employees, think about customers, make them happy. Every day when you receive the positive feedback from the users, how you help them and they stay with their family, and how you help our employees, finally they can afford a house, you just feel very happy. And not your power or money, those happiness just short term, not sustainable.
I will tell you, Eric, your technology has been an incredible source of happiness for millions, billions of people around the world since the pandemic set in, and people who have happy hours and who can see loved ones and can interface with people in a way that we had FaceTime before Zoom became ubiquitous, but it wasn't the same thing. And the technology that you put together has allowed people to stay connected at a time when staying connected has been so difficult. So it is really quite something to hear that be a mission of yours back when WebEx went public, and then to see it really come to not only fruition, but on a scale that nobody ever could have imagined.
Yep.
So my final question for you, I know that you're a big basketball fan. So two things. One, who do you think is going to win the NBA Finals? And then I think almost more importantly, are we going to see you as an owner of an NBA franchise sometime soon? Because I think your love of the NBA and your success, those two things have sort of come together so I'd love to know which team you're going to go out and buy.
So first of all, I think the answer to your second question is no, actually. For the first question, I still think Lakers and very likely to be the champion this year. By the way, I want to share with you why I like basketball. In the business, it's ultimate space, because I like basketball. The players, they work so hard for a game. They win one game, they kind of celebrate. Guess what? Next week or next day, the new game will start. You will start over. The business is very like that. Today you are working so hard, make a progress. Guess what? Tomorrow, start over. And plus, you can learn a lot, by watching those players, how they play together. That's why my favorite, sport is the NBA. And it's every day, every time I watch that, I feel very recharged by how they play, how they win. That's it's amazing.
Well, I had Chris Paul on the Walker Webcast about 3 weeks ago, and he's an amazing player. He's an amazing leader of the Players Association, and it was a real thrill to have him on talking about everything from Black Lives Matter to the NBA and life inside the bubble. So, Eric, I have to say thank you so much. It's been a real honor to have you on. As you know, Walker & Dunlop and Zoom have been partners for quite some years, and you guys have been fundamental to our growth and our success. And so I'm very thankful of you taking an hour out of your very busy schedule to join us and to talk about all these issues. And I take my hat off to you on having not only a successful company, but a company that stands for so much more than just a huge market capitalization and something that has changed, it fundamentally changed all of our lives. And so I'm both honored and very thankful of you joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Willy. I truly appreciate it. Thank you.
Nice to see you, Eric. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.